Have you ever loved someone so deep that even after they broke you, you still whispered their name in your prayers? Have you ever given your whole life to someone, your time, your strength, your laughter, and then watched them walk away like you were just another day in their life? I guess that's the kind of love that either makes you or burns you alive. Hello, my dear one. Thank you for listening to me tonight. If it's not too much to ask, could you tell me where you're listening from? And what time is it for you right now? Because over here, the night's been long, and sometimes when I tell my story, it feels like someone somewhere might need to hear it too. My name's Angela Brown, and this is not just a story about a man leaving his wife. It's about what happens after he leaves. When the noise fades, when everyone stops calling, when the kitchen gets too quiet and the bed too cold. I wasn't always a strong woman. No, don't let this voice fool you. I used to be the kind that said, "It's okay, maybe he's tired," even when I knew he wasn't coming home. I used to believe in the kind of love that forgives anything, until life taught me that forgiveness means nothing if you keep bleeding for someone who never learned to care. When I first met Michael, he was charm itself. The kind of man who'd laugh like the world was his friend. He had dreams, big ones, said he'd open a repair shop, said we'd build a small house by the lake someday. And I believed every word. We married young, too young maybe, but my mama used to say, "Angela, some storms look like sunshine at first." I didn't understand that until later. For a few years, life was kind. We had our daughter, Ruth, my small miracle with her big eyes and tiny hands. Michael used to lift her up high and say, "That's my girl. She'll have everything I couldn't." And I'd smile because I believed him. But dreams, they don't cook dinner. And promises don't pay bills. The day Michael lost his job, it rained hard. He came home soaked, smelling like engine oil and disappointment. I remember wiping his face with a towel, telling him, "It's fine, love. We'll manage." I said it with all the faith I had, because that's what wives do, right? We build hope out of scraps when the world starts falling apart, so I started baking again. At first, just for neighbors, a few loaves, some sweet buns. I used my grandmother's old recipe, the one that never failed no matter how little sugar or flour we had. Michael wasn't too happy about it. He said, "Angela, people will laugh. You think bread can pay the rent?" And I told him, "It can if you bake it with love. Funny thing about love, it doesn't fill empty pockets." Michael began to change. He'd come home late, smell of expensive cologne I didn't own. He'd say he'd been out with the boys, but the boys didn't wear lipstick. You don't have to be smart to know when your man stops seeing you. It's in the way his eyes avoid yours, how he stops finishing the sentences you start. I still remember that evening. The oven was warm, the bread was rising slow, and Ruth was sitting on the counter drawing hearts on the flour dust. Michael walked in quiet, too quiet. He didn't kiss me hello. He didn't touch Ruth's hair. He just stood there, his hands shaking a little, and said the words that turned my whole world into noise. "I can't do this anymore, Angela. I need more from life. I met someone. She understands me. She can give me things you can't." My hands went still. The dough slipped between my fingers. And I looked at him. This man I'd fed, loved, prayed for, like I was seeing a stranger in my own kitchen. I asked, "More? More than what, Michael? More than loyalty? More than nights I stayed up fixing your clothes when you were too drunk to stand?" He didn't answer. He just said, "You'll be fine. You're strong." And then he left. Just like that. No bags packed, no hugs for Ruth. Just the sound of the door closing and the smell of burnt bread filling the room. That night, I didn't cry loud. I sat on the floor, held my daughter, and whispered, "It's okay, baby." Mama's still here, but inside, something broke quietly. like a thread that finally snapped after holding too much weight. Days passed. People talked. Some said I should hate him, others said I should move on. But hate, it's too heavy to carry when you still got a child to raise. So I did what I knew best. I baked. Every morning before the sun came up, I kneaded dough, prayed for strength, and promised myself one thing: that Ruth would never feel small because her father left. And slowly, something happened. The smell of bread started bringing people to my door. A neighbor came first, then another, and soon enough the whole street smelled like hope again. I saved every coin, put Ruth in school, and told her, "We might not have much, but what we have, it's honest. But don't think it was easy." Nights were long. There were times I'd look out the window, wondering if Michael ever missed home. If he ever thought about the woman still wearing the ring he left behind. Sometimes, I'd whisper to myself, maybe he's happy. And then I'd laugh a little and say, maybe I will be too someday. You know, life has a strange way of testing women like me. It doesn't come with big warnings. It just keeps asking, will you still stand? And somehow, we always do. I started selling my bread in the market. First a small table, then a tiny stall. People would smile and say, "Angela, your bread tastes like love." I'd smile back. But inside I knew it tasted like pain turned into patience. One morning, months after he left, I heard someone mention Michael's name at the market. They said he'd married some rich woman from uptown. I froze. Not because I didn't expect it, but because hearing it felt like closing a door I never wanted open again. I went home that day, looked at my hands covered in flour, and said to myself, these same hands once built him up. Now they'll build me. That night I stayed up late baking. Not for customers, for me. Because for the first time I wasn't baking to survive. I was baking to remember that I could create something warm from a heart that had gone cold. People say time heals everything. They lie. Time doesn't heal. It just teaches you how to live with the scar, and by the time the scar stops hurting, you realize it's the most beautiful part of you. So if you're listening to this, and someone walked away from you too, remember this: the door they closed on you wasn't an ending. It was a beginning you didn't know you needed, because that's how it was for me. I just didn't know then that the man who left me for more would one day come back for less. But that, my dear listener, is a story for another night. You know what's strange about silence? At first it feels like punishment, and then one day it starts to feel like peace. When Michael left, I thought the house would fall apart. But the walls stayed. The chair he used to sit on, still there. His cup, his books, his smell, everything stayed. Everything except him. The first week, Ruth kept asking, "Mama, when's Daddy coming home?" And I'd smile, stroke her hair, and say, "He's just on a trip, baby." She believed me. Children always believe the lies we tell to keep their hearts from breaking. But I couldn't lie to myself. Every time I lit the oven, I remembered the warmth we used to share. Now it was just heat, no laughter. No voice humming along to the radio. Just me, the hiss of the fire and the ticking clock. Days blended into weeks. I worked harder, baked more. Sometimes I'd forget to eat, but I never forgot to pray. There was something about kneading dough that kept me alive. The rhythm of it, push, fold, turn. It felt like I was pressing my pain into something that could rise. People started to notice. They said my bread had soul in it. Maybe they were right. Maybe every loaf carried a piece of me. The tired part, the hopeful part, the forgiving part. Soon I had regulars, teachers, drivers, even the old watchman down the street. They'd come, talk a bit, buy 2 loaves, and tell me, "Angela, your bread don't just fill the stomach, it fills the heart." I'd smile, say thank you, and inside whisper, if only hearts stayed full that easy. Ruth grew fast. She learned how to pack the bread in little paper bags, and sometimes she'd draw tiny hearts on them. One day she asked, Mama, why don't you ever talk about Daddy? I looked at her. She had his eyes, that same mix of softness and stubbornness. So I said, because some stories ain't done baking yet. She didn't understand, but she hugged me anyway, and I realized how heavy love can be when you carry it alone. There were nights when loneliness pressed against me like a cold wind. I'd sit by the window, watch people pass, couples laughing, and I'd wonder if Michael ever thought of me. If he was happy, if his new woman treated him kind, then I'd remember the way he left, not a backward glance, not a word to Ruth, and I'd pull the blanket tighter, telling myself, no tears tonight. But the tears, they don't listen. They come when they want. One evening, while packing up at the market, a woman I knew whispered, You hear about Michael? He's working with his new wife's family now, living good life. Her tone had that mix of pity and curiosity that people use when they want to see if you'll break. I just said, that's good. May God keep him well, and I meant it. Not because I'd forgiven him yet, but because I was too tired to hate. That night, Ruth and I sat on the floor eating bread ends and tea. She said, Mama, I think your bread is magic. I asked why. She said, because no matter how sad you are, it still tastes sweet. I smiled. If only she knew that sweetness was the sugar of survival. Months turned into years. The market stall became a little shop. A small blue sign hung above it, Brown's Bakery. I'd saved enough to paint the walls, buy a second-hand mixer, and a small radio that played slow songs in the morning. Sometimes I'd dance a little while cleaning and laugh at myself. It felt strange, that laugh, like a guest I hadn't seen in years. But happiness is shy. It comes quietly when you're not watching. One afternoon, while serving customers, a fancy car parked outside. Two women stepped out, dressed sharp, smelling like money. They bought a few loaves and asked who owned the bakery. When I said it was me, one of them smiled and said, Your bread is well known. People talk about it everywhere. That day I realized, success doesn't make noise. It rises slow, just like bread. I started hiring 2 helpers. Ruth was now in high school, and she'd tell her friends proudly, My mama bakes the best bread in town. Those words healed places inside me that I didn't know were still bleeding. Then, one rainy evening, while closing up, I saw a man standing across the road, drenched, holding a small umbrella. I didn't see his face, but something about the way he stood made my heart skip. For a second I thought, no, it couldn't be. Michael was long gone from my story. Still, the next morning I couldn't shake that feeling. I kept glancing at the door, half expecting the past to walk in. But it didn't, not yet. Instead, life kept going. I'd wake before dawn, light the oven, hum a small hymn, and talk to myself while kneading the dough. People think working alone is sad, but sometimes solitude is a friend that never interrupts. One night, as I was cleaning, I found his old mug behind a shelf. It still had that faded print. World's Best Dad. I held it for a moment. Not out of longing, but out of gratitude. Because without the pain he gave me, I would have never found this strength. You see, pain has a purpose. It breaks what needs breaking so truth can finally breathe. I thought of all the women who came to buy bread, some with tired faces, some hiding bruises behind their smiles, some pretending to be fine. And I realized we all carry our own kind of hunger. Mine just happened to be the kind that could feed others. Ruth grew into a beautiful young lady. Every evening she'd help close the shop. One night she said, Mama, when I get older I want to open another branch for you. I laughed. Child, one oven is enough trouble for me. But inside I felt proud, because all I ever wanted was to give her more than I had. Then came that quiet Sunday. The kind of day that smells like calm before a storm. I was arranging the bread on the shelves when a small boy peeked in, his clothes wet, eyes big. "Miss Angela, my papa sent me to buy one bread. He said the cheapest one you got." I smiled at him, handed a small loaf. He gave me a few coins, counted twice, and ran out. Something about that boy's face stayed with me. He had that same look Ruth used to have, innocence mixed with worry. I didn't know it then, but that was the day life started circling back to me. The next week, I saw the same boy again. He came with a man this time, tall, shoulders slumped, hair sprinkled with gray. He kept his head down, as if the floor held the answers he didn't want to face. When he looked up, my heart forgot how to beat. Michael. He looked nothing like the man I once knew. The shine was gone, the laughter too. His eyes, they carried years of regret. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at me, as if searching for the woman he left behind. I didn't speak either. Because some moments don't need words. They just need silence to show how far life has traveled. He cleared his throat finally and said, "Angela, you still baking?" And I smiled, slow and calm. "Yes, Michael. Still baking." He nodded, eyes dropping to the counter. Then he whispered, "Can I get one cake?" "The cheapest one you have." I paused. For a second, I almost laughed at the irony. But I didn't. Instead, I asked, "What's the occasion?" He said, "My little girl's birthday." And just like that, I saw it. The circle life had drawn. He once left me for more, and now he came back for less. I packed the smallest cake, placed it gently on the counter. He tried to pay, but I shook my head. "Take it. It's on the house." His eyes lifted, wet and surprised. "Why?" I said. "Because someone already paid for it, with the pieces of me you left behind." He couldn't speak, and I didn't want to hear any apology. Because sometimes peace sounds better than closure. As he walked out with the cake and the little girl, Ruth came from the back and asked softly, "Mama, who was that?" I said, "Just someone learning how expensive regret can be." That night, when I closed the shop, I sat by the oven, the fire crackling like an old friend, and whispered to myself, "See, Angela? You baked through the storm, and you rose, but little did I know. Life wasn't done yet. There was still one thing left to rise, the truth behind Michael's return. And that, my dear listener, I'll tell you next time." You ever notice how the past always finds a way back, not to punish, but to ask if you've really learned what it came to teach? After Michael showed up that day, the air in the bakery felt different, like the smell of rain before it falls. I didn't tell Ruth much, and she didn't press. She's grown enough to know that silence can mean more than stories. For a few days, everything was normal again. The bread still rose, the customers still came, and I still hummed my morning hymns. But my thoughts wouldn't stay quiet. They kept circling back to his face, the tired eyes, the way his hands trembled when he held that cake. It wasn't guilt I felt. It was something softer, sadder, the kind of ache that comes when you see a ghost wearing your memories. Then one afternoon, a letter came. No name on it. Just to Miss Brown. The handwriting was rough, familiar in a way that made my chest tighten. Inside was a short note. "I owe you more than I can ever say. If you'll let me, I'd like to come by and talk. I'm not asking for forgiveness, only for a chance to tell you the truth." I stared at it for a long while. Forgiveness isn't cheap, but curiosity has its own hunger. So I wrote back 3 words on a scrap of paper. You can come." He came the next evening, after closing time, when the bakery smelled of cinnamon and quiet. Ruth was out with friends, so it was just the two of us, the way it used to be, and yet, nothing like before. He stood by the counter, hands twisting his cap like a boy waiting to be scolded. "Thank you," he said, voice low, "for letting me come." I nodded. "Go on then," I said. "You wanted to talk?" He took a deep breath, eyes glistening in the dim light. "When I left," he started, "I thought I was running toward something better, freedom, money, comfort. But truth is, I was just running from myself." I stayed silent, let him speak. "I thought I loved her," he said quietly. "The woman I left you for. But what I really loved was the idea of being seen again. You were busy building a home, and I was busy feeling invisible." He paused, looked at his hands. "She left me after 2 years, took everything. The house, the savings, even the friends I thought were mine." His voice cracked. "I was too proud to come back. Then, my daughter got sick last year, her mother passed, and all I could think about was you and Ruth, how you both deserved better than the man I became." There was a long silence. The kind that hums. I didn't cry. I'd already spent my tears years ago. "Why now, Michael?" I finally asked. He looked up, tired and hollow. "Because I wanted you to know you were right about everything, and I wanted to tell Ruth the truth myself, before someone else does." For a moment, I almost said no, almost told him to keep his distance, but then I saw that little boy's face again, his daughter's face, and I realized how cruel cycles can be when nobody breaks them. So I said, "She's old enough to hear it. Come tomorrow evening. I'll make tea." He nodded, tears catching the corner of his mouth, and when he left, the wind that came through the open door felt lighter somehow. The next evening, Ruth sat beside me at the kitchen table. Michael came in, slow, quiet, like someone walking through a dream. For a long time, none of us spoke. Then he looked at her and said, "I'm sorry, Ruth, for not being there, for missing everything I should have been part of." Ruth's eyes stayed steady. "You broke her," she said, voice trembling. "You left us." "I know," he whispered, "and I'll live with that. But I just wanted you to know, I never stopped thinking about you, even when I didn't deserve to." Ruth didn't cry. She just stood up, walked over to him and said, "People always say they never stopped thinking. But the thing is, you can think all you want. It's showing up that matters." Then she turned and went to her room. The door shut soft, like a page turning. Michael sat there, broken. "I ruined everything," he said, and for the first time, I reached out, put my hand over his. "You didn't ruin everything," I said quietly. "You just stopped halfway through the story." He looked at me, confused, hopeful, and I continued. "Sometimes, people leave because they don't know how to stay, and sometimes, forgiveness isn't about letting them back in. It's about letting the hurt go out." He nodded, tears falling freely now. "I don't expect anything," he said. "I just wanted you to hear the truth." After he left that night, I sat by the window for a long time, watching the moonlight crawl across the empty street. For the first time in years, I didn't feel angry. Just free. A week later, Ruth told me she'd met his little girl, the one he mentioned, said she was shy but sweet. She'd brought a small card with crayon hearts on it. It said, "Thank you for the cake." That night, Ruth looked at me and said, "Mama, I don't hate him anymore." And I smiled, because that was the moment I knew the cycle was done. Weeks passed. Michael started visiting sometimes, never overstaying, never asking for more. He helped fix the broken shelves, taught Ruth's friend how to drive. He was trying, not to be the man he once was, but to be a better version of what was left. And I found peace in that. Because people don't always come back to be loved again. Sometimes, they come back to return what they borrowed, even if it's just an apology. The bakery kept growing. One day, Ruth said she wanted to study abroad. I told her to go, to build her own life, not the one she thought I wanted for her. The day she left, I stood in the same doorway where Michael once walked out, and I realized how far we'd come. The house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt earned. I still bake every morning, still talk to the dough like it's an old friend. And sometimes, I see Michael sitting outside the shop, reading his newspaper, waiting quietly for a loaf to cool. He always waves before leaving, and I wave back. We never talk about the past anymore. We don't need to. It's baked into everything already. The warmth, the quiet, the small forgivenesses that rise inside us every day. So, if you're listening to this, wherever you are, whatever time it is, I want you to remember something. Life doesn't always give you the endings you want, but it gives you the chance to write a new one, and when pain visits, don't chase it away too soon. Let it sit for a while. Sometimes, pain is just love trying to teach you how to stay whole. So, thank you for listening, for giving space to my little story about bread, loss, and the strange mercy of time. And if it's not too much to ask, wherever you are, could you tell me what time it is over there? Just wondering how far my voice had to travel to find you, because maybe that's all we're ever doing, trying to reach each other one story at a time.